Prayer, and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
That's nice. Lucky.
God our Father, we are all your servants. We trust in your mercy and love. We trust also in your guidance. Direct the meetings of this council of North College Hill to make good decisions for all the people who live in our city. Give all the members of this council wisdom and insight to know what is best for our city. Help us to be fair and just in all our decisions. Bless us all to do the very best we can. With your help and guidance, we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Call this meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, again, welcome. It is March 17th. This is our second council meeting in March. Good to have a good crowd here tonight. I do want to just, before we move on, mention that it's been brought to my attention by some members of council, members of the administration, and even members of our citizens that I need to do a little better job controlling meetings. And so I just want to let everyone know that that's going to be a focus of mine tonight. Here's what I do ask. Disruptions, outbursts, anything like that. I like to let people talk and say their piece. I believe that's important in the democratic process. But this is a public meeting. There are rules. We need to follow those rules. And if someone cannot keep themselves under control, I may ask them to leave tonight, and I don't want to do that. So I'm asking everyone to show that respect for the meeting that we are in, and we can get through everything just fine tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Hedger for the roll call.
Miss Orb.
Here.
Miss Gaston.
Here.
Miss Chichester.
Here.
Miss Alexander.
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Miss Underwood.
Here.
Thank you. We do have tonight's agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agendas for tonight. I would like to add an executive session. You need to,
We need to know why.
to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing.
Okay, and where would you like that?
Before we go to legislation,
Before legislation?
or wherever you want to put it in.
It's your motion.
Can we do it before council committee?
Well, I'd rather not do it before council committees.
What you just said.
But I did say that.
But before we do, call the members.
Okay, so the motion is to amend tonight's agenda, adding an executive session before call of members. And
Mr.
she read the
President,
reason. Ms. Underwood.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Ms. Chichester to amend the agenda, adding an executive session before call of members, seconded by Ms. Underwood. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Miss Orb.
Yes.
Miss Gaston. Miss
Yes.
Chichester.
Yes.
Miss Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Miss Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
And Mr. President,
Mr. Davis?
okay, I'd also like to make a motion to amend the agenda. I'd like to add legislation resolution number 6-2025 into the first reading. That'd be in the legislation portion.
All right, I have a motion to amend the agenda, adding Resolution 6, 2024. What is the title of that resolution, sir?
A resolution authorizing the city to prepare and submit an application for a violent crime reduction grant through the State of Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services and declaring an emergency.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to amend the agenda, adding Resolution 6, 2024 for first reading.
Mr. President,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wilson.
I'd like to second.
Mr. President.
All right, I have the agenda, amend the agenda, have the motion to amend the agenda, adding Resolution 6 by Mr. Davis, second by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion?
Mr.
Mr.
President,
President.
I did have Ms. Chichester, so I'll let her go first.
Is it Resolution 6, 2025 or Resolution
Oh,
6,
it
2024?
is 6, 2025. You are correct.
Thank you.
Is that what everybody else was trying to do?
No.
Okay, Ms. Alexander?
Do we have a copy of that?
So we have it in our emails. I printed an original copy, but for whatever reason, the printer isn't in the back isn't working. So I'm going to have to find it.
So no, we do not have paper copies.
Right,
Okay,
at this
but it was
point,
sent in an email. Okay.
Ms. Dukestein?
it's to apply for a grant.
Yes, ma'am.
Is who's applying?
It's via the police department.
Mr. President.
Who was that?
That was me.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Underwood.
Which committee is this gonna kind of pass through? Or is it gonna pass through a committee?
Mr. Davis?
I would assume public safety.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
I just learned from Chief Cheney that the grant the deadline is in 2 days. It's highly likely that we may not be able to complete it in fullness. We would need to administratively look at what our responsibilities are and what it would require. The preparation for grants usually takes a lot longer than 2 days. So I would ask that council consider that for us.
Any other discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
so I guess I'm thoroughly confused because there was a conversation of putting it into a committee, which would delay that, and I'm hearing 2 days, which would mean we have to suspend readings and pass it. So I guess I'm trying to look for some focus and recommendations on what should really happen here.
And who are you looking for that from?
Since it was Mr. Davis's motion, I would look to him for that information.
Okay. So I found and was made aware that the grant was available approximately a week and a half ago, and we brought it up in the Public Safety Committee last week, and but it has a due date of the 19th. So as a result, the plan was to go for it and apply for the grant, but as I found, I saw a resolution, I believe it's for 2025, where we made a resolution stating that we're going to prepare and submit this application. So as a result, just to make sure that all the ducks were in a row, I also created Resolution 6, 2025, just to make sure that everything was done according to proper process.
Mr. President?
Ms. Zorb?
I have a follow-up question to that. So, Mr. Davis, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think what I heard in there is that you made these changes, so is it safe to presume that it has not been vetted by the law director?
Nah, I sent it to the law director at the same in the same time I sent it to y'all. So if I've received any changes, or if there's anything I need to edit, that I will go forth with that. But I am mentioning that it is time sensitive. The deadline date is the 19th.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
Mr. Davis, did you include me on that email?
I believe so. I'll check and see. If not, I'll forward to you now.
Mr. President, one last comment, sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Dukestein.
I just wanted to make sure that you all know if you're passing legislation, you're basically mandating that we do this, and we have 2 days. So I'm not sure if this is the right process.
Mr. President,
Ms. Alexander.
is this doable? I just want to come out and ask, is this something that can be done? Has it been done before?
Mr. President.
If I'm allowed to answer that.
Go ahead, Ms. Dukestein.
I would say that it is putting an extreme amount of stress on myself, the finance department, and Chief Cheney, because we would be the 3 hustling to do that. Both of us are in interviews the next 2 days. It would depend on, I have not read the parameters of the grant, but it would also depend on if we have those documents already ready to go, which could be feasible, but to put it in a law that we have to do it would put an immense amount of pressure on both Janie, myself, and our finance manager.
Ms. Underwood.
I know that sometimes, under certain circumstances, they will extend the deadline for grant applications. Perhaps we can amend the legislation to make it such that if it is within your power to get that done, and if they give you additional time if needed, maybe we can do that so that we don't miss an opportunity. In addition to that, I was trying to find the rule. I know there's a rule where the president of council or the mayor, I believe, can refer legislation to the agenda. Am I misremembering that?
All right, but where are you going with that?
That way it doesn't have to necessarily go through a committee, since it would need to be passed today. And in addition,
So the amendment is to add it to the agenda tonight for a first reading. That is what his amendment is. I have a motion by Mr. Davis, a second by Mr. Wilson to amend the agenda, adding Resolution 6, 2025 for first reading.
okay.
All right,
Mr.
President.
Ms. Zorb.
I'm sorry, I know I've already spoken once. I would like to point out that it is a resolution and not an ordinance, so it's not a mandate. And the other thing I'd like to point out is, I don't have it in my hand, but Mr. Davis said it's a resolution authorizing the city to apply. It's not mandating the city to apply. At least that's the way I would interpret that.
Mr. Cheney.
So, looking through part of the grant, because I had talked to Lexipol 2 weeks ago concerning this grant, because it was brought to my attention as well, and they told me it was not doable at that point 2 weeks ago, basically because the large portion of the grant that we could use it for as law enforcement is to buy reduction equipment for crime. So like shot spotter equipment, additional flock safety equipment, cameras in certain areas. That would require us to get bids from a lot of different vendors. There's no way we can do in a 2-day period. So it's a great grant. I would love to obviously have it, but I don't think we have the resources at this time to do it. Now, I don't mind checking tomorrow with the state to see if they will grant an extension. And if they do, that would be great. Then we can work on it. But like Ms. Dukestein said, in 2 days, there's no way I could do this.
Okay. Thank you for that input. But we do have a motion on the floor. So, Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Orb,
Yes.
Mrs. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I think I would like to make a motion to accept the agenda as presented,
As amended.
as amended. That's what I meant to say.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wilson?
I'd like to second that.
Motion by Ms. Zorb, second by Mr. Wilson to adopt, or accept, accept the agenda tonight as amended. Any discussion?
No.
Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you. We have minutes from the March 3rd meeting.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
I would like to make a motion that we accept the minutes from March 3rd, 2025, as is.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Gaston, second by Ms. Underwood to accept the minutes from the 3/3/2025 meeting. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you. Next is communication. What do you have for us this evening, Mr. Hedger?
Thank you, Mr. President. The only thing I would ask council is a reminder of resolution number 1 for the Iron Mountain contract would need to be passed at this council meeting to avoid further extensions or possible price increases from the contractor. I'm also aware that there are some changes that have been presented to council from the last committee meeting. I would suggest that making these changes, depending on who can complete this work on organizing it, will be difficult, if not impossible, to find a contractor that can complete organization of all of the documents or scanning all the documents and then how to put them online or in a usable format. So just be aware of the legislation and the workload that you're asking. That's it.
That's all you have, sir?
That's it.
All right, that will take us to council committees, starting with City Community Development and Recreation.
Mr. President?
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, so City Community Recreation met on March 10th. We intended to meet with the Recreation Director, but we was unable to, so we tabled that. Ms. Gaskins introduced the beautification contest with some of the rules and to the program. And I'm sure that Ms. Alexander did what she said that she would do as far as reaching out to Mr. Dieters, Ms. Zorb. So,
You want me to do it?
yeah.
Okay. So I did send the email to Mr. Dieters, getting the legislation, and I believe that is here with us tonight. Ms. Zorb asked if we could be provided the fireworks plan when Mr. Wilson talked about the different organizations of where the fireworks would be set off. Ms. Zorb had additional questions. Also, we talked about that there would be a special meeting occurring on March 31st at 6 p.m. Ms. Dukestein advised that Ms. Clear had worked on a sponsor letter in order to get sponsors for the fireworks show, and also that the city had a membership for movies because it had been brought up to possibly have movies this summer, and there is a membership that possibly could be utilized to show movies on city property. The date was still pending for a party in the park. There was a discussion regarding food trucks sign up to be kind of digitalized online via Sign Up Genius. And there was going to be a Juneteenth kickoff meeting scheduled for, I believe, either the next day or the day after that. I believe it was like March 12th. And then the meeting was adjourned at 7:35 p.m.
When is the next meeting?
The next meeting is April the 14th? Okay. Is it April 14th? That seemed kind of far away. Is that it? April 14th at 7 p.m. That seems far away for some reason.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
did you mention a special meeting
Yes.
in there? What date and time was that?
March 31st at 6 p.m.
Okay.
That's your next meeting.
That is, the special meeting,
Will be our next meeting.
March 31st at 6 p.m. here at the Senior Center.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Edger?
for the special meeting, who is calling the special meeting? And
I
who-
am.
You are. Can you send me an email so we can get signatures?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Right, next is budget and finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. In our Budget and Finance Committee meeting on March the 10th, we discussed the January end of month monthly report, and we also discussed the fire levy legislation, and we also discussed Iron Mountain legislation, which Mr. Hedger was referencing. There was a question about that on there, about our ask from him on there, and whether or not we were going to have Iron Mountain organize and send all the documents out to be scanned and then organize it, or we were going to, as council, get together, organize it, go through it, and then send it to be scanned, because they charge per paper or per piece of paper. And so council discussed the best course of action, and I think we came up with the fact that we just wanted to send it off and let it scan and then organize it. We also discussed the Electrada, which is the electric fuel, I'm calling it electric fuel, but the electric pumps over at the 1500 building. And we read the report of how much usage they were being used, and what days of the week were the most used from those pumps. And then we discussed the 1500 building cleanup. So, council was asked to forward any questions over if they would need to make a informed decision, and we received some questions, and I believe all questions were answered. Everybody? Yep. So, and that's it in budget and finance.
Thank you, Ms. Chichester.
You're welcome.
Next is rules and public policy.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the only thing we really discussed in rules and public policy was the comprehensive plan, and there was quite a bit of discussion about, there was kind of two trains of thought. Just kind of that there was a lot of information, but ultimately, of course, I was wondering what the big rush was, but ultimately what we decided to do was to request legislation and put it on the agenda to be considered by all of council. So that's what we did. And that's pretty much all that we discussed. So our next meeting will be April 14th at 6:30.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood.
Mr.
And public
President?
safety. Oh, hang on. Ms. Dukestein?
I have a question about the legislation for the comprehensive plan. Did you guys decide whether you would incorporate the 12 asks from the planning commission in the comprehensive plan? Or is just the comprehensive plan?
It's just the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Okay, next is public safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. We received a report and an update from the police department, from Chief Cheney. He kind of gave us some updates with regard to what's been going on with the police department. They've had a significant kind of traffic blitz They have given out quite a few warnings, but, you know, of course, I encourage them to write tickets because I just think it would slow people down. It seems like they get slowed down through College Hill and then they speed up coming through North College Hill. And then I also mentioned that for the first time, I don't know, maybe ever, I actually drove up Galbraith toward Coleraine on Galbraith Avenue during rush hour traffic. I don't think I had ever done that. And not less than 4 cars sped past me in that center breakout lane. And that is a huge problem. I know we can't do away with it because of the emergency vehicles that need to travel through there. But I mean, I would love to see some, you know, speed bumps that move around, you know, in that lane to kind of slow people down. I don't know, but I was very alarmed by that. I didn't realize, I mean, it was like I was sitting still. I mean, we were inching along, but then these cars just zoom, zoom, zoom. And I was just like it was a normal high-speed lane. First of all, the speed limit is always 25 in North College Hill for those who are listening, except in the school zone where it's 10. It's always 25. So under zero circumstances should you be driving faster than 25. Zero. So that being said, we talked about that. We received some updates from the fire department. I know that administration is still diligently searching for a public works director. And we did talk about, Mr. Davis did mention this grant that he's been working on to try to get us to see if we can apply, that we kind of added to the agenda tonight. Our next meeting will be April 14th at 6:30.
Thank you. Next up is ad hoc reports. Does anyone have any ad hoc reports this evening?
I do, Mr. President.
Ms. Underwood.
So the North College Hill Charter Review Commission met on March 12th at 5:30. Mr. Dieters was present and kind of gave us, kind of some parameters that we needed to keep in mind. We do need to make recommendations back to council by May so that council can decide whether they're going to adopt our recommendations or not. So that gives us approximately 3 more hours because we're meeting every other week with this. Also, there were some really good recommendations, so we're just kind of still mulling that over, and we will have a report for recommendations to council by our deadline.
Thank you. Any other ad hoc reports this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to the administrative reports. The mayor was unable to be with us this evening, so we'll go to the city administrator's report. Good evening, Ms. Dukestein.
I wanted to remind council, hello everybody. I wanted to remind council that May the 5th is a Monday, and this site will be used as a voting poll for the next day, voting location for the next day. So you all will have to find a location. I can follow up with the Center for the Blind if you'd like, but I just need your direction to see if we could go there. So just let me know. You can respond via email. And then Ms. Underwood gave her report, and she had asked in her meetings for the signs, which Public Works is working very diligently to replace the signs in the alleyways and the streets and make sure that we have appropriate signage throughout the city of North College Hill. To the citizens, if you can put in a submission on the website to Public Works, they will respond to that. But the Bake sign and Gloria sign is the appropriate size. Actually, we did some checking, and that is the appropriate size, but we're going to replace it with a bigger one since the visibility isn't there. And we have both the Bake sign and the Gloria sign coming up soon, so I wanted to follow up with that. The same process for potholes. We have a lot of potholes in the alleys and the streets. They're working really, really hard to get those filled so that we don't have any tragedies with our cars. Nobody wants that. Please submit a submission online, and that helps Public Works know where those are. Be as detailed as possible, because that helps us identify and get out to fill them. March 18th, Foxwood Avenue will be shut down for 8 hours. I'm going to put a blurb on the website to notify citizens for 8 hours straight. The water will be out during the day. And then we have this week a swearing in of a new police officer. There was some follow-up ask at the Budget and Finance meeting for the Electrata. I am working on that. I heard back, well, Ms. Anderson heard back from the person at Electrata, and they're going to let us know how that translates via dollars. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dukestein.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
The teams versus the shared drive. I need direction on that from you guys. I will tell you, I did have a conversation with Mr. Wilson, our IT person, and he's leaning more towards you guys porting through a VPN because it's just secure. But you all have the liberty to choose and what you want to do about your devices. So I just wanted to put that back in your ear to follow up with me so I can move directionally with that.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I actually was going to bring that up during old business. I, first of all, think that we should all have the same kind of device. I understand that the devices that were already assigned, the other two are just not there. The other thing I would ask my colleagues to keep in mind is I understand that there's a cost associated with it, but I absolutely cannot use my devices that I use for my business for North College Hill in the event that they are subpoenaed or whatever thing that happens. If there's a lawsuit, a public records request, I absolutely cannot do that because of the nature of the work that I do. So I think that we need to figure out, like, quickly what we want to do, especially since we've kind of decided that we're going to have all of our documents scanned in so that we can go through and figure out what we're going to do. So I just would ask that we figure that out today.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the Law Director's report.
President, I have no report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dieters. And then we do have the Finance Director's report. The Finance Director is not here this evening. So we amended the agenda to add an executive session at this point.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester.
am I allowed to exclude a member of council?
That would be a good question for the Law Director because I've never been asked that before.
I would have to know a little more information, Ms. Manchester, if you don't mind. I can talk to you before we go in.
I want to inform council about something that was brought to my attention for the behavior of one of my council members, and I want them to make a decision on some things.
Probably cannot exclude that person.
And okay, let's go into executive session.
Make a motion.
We gotta
Have
make
to
a
make a
motion.
Yeah, I
motion.
need a motion.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester,
I make a motion to go into executive session. Do I need to read the whole thing again?
you need to read whatever part of it you need to read.
Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22, I move that council enter into executive session under Section G1 to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing.
Okay, we have a
Mr.
motion.
President.
Ms. Underwood.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Chichester, second by Ms. Underwood to move into executive session. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Orb,
Yeah.
Ms. Gaston.
Yes.
Ms. Chichester.
Yes.
Ms. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
We'll move into executive session. Next item on the agenda was call of members, starting with Ms. Orb.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a couple things to talk about tonight. So I am curious, we have not seen a resolution for the ODOT road salt contract yet this year, and typically that's done in February. So I'm wondering if we have, if that's in the works. Also on, I just want to remind council that on 10/7/2024, Mr. Wilson made a motion to have the city administrator research further steps to take for the restoration of the city center building. And that motion passed 5-0. At the time, Ms. Chamberlain was the city administrator, and she offered to write a step-by-step process to mitigate hazardous building and rehab the building, offer opinions to be used that would generate revenue, as well as a potential grant resources or funding sources. She also said she would conduct a community engagement session with Planning Commission to discuss ideas, options, and compile a final report. I had then asked for an ROI for sustainability at that time. So I know Ms. Chamberlain was the city administrator at that time, but the motion was for the city administrator. So I was wondering if our current city administrator could follow through on that motion. I was a little surprised to see the legislation for the city center for 1500 West Galbraith on the agenda for tonight. And the reason why I was surprised is because at this point, what's been provided to council as of today has just been estimates for work to be done there. One estimate we have is from Icon Property Rescue, and that was dated April 19th of 2024, and it clearly states that it's only good for 14 days. That was for $22,848, and their scope was to remove mold in their terms, the office section. And when you look at the information granularly, it did not include the Historical Society, so it wasn't even a full report. The other one we have is from RWB Properties and Construction, and actually one copy that I got from the finance chair had the company whited out for some reason. I'm not sure why that happened. But the city originally received that on June 10th of 2024. That was for $3,265,426. That scope, and it clearly states it's an estimate, it's not a firm bid. And there are multiple exclusions and exceptions noted, totaling in almost another $1 million. It was $935,000. And the other kind of document we have wasn't even an estimate. It was just kind of an analysis of the building, and that was submitted by B&N, and their I forget their final number was anywhere from $3 million to $9 million. And again, this was from last year, from June-ish of last year. So at the finance meeting on 3/10, just a short while ago, the chair made an impromptu request for council to ask any questions that they may have regarding the 1500 West Galbraith demolition / renovation. At that time, there were several council members that said they had already made their decision and they were good. There were, Mr. Davis said that he would submit an email with a couple questions that he still had. Then Ms. Gaston said that her comment was, what do we want to be when we grow up? It was a quote from Mayor Brooks. She also asked, we had received reports that the building had good bones, but she asked for the supporting documents to say that it has good bones, and could the building support us through 2040 and 2045? Her third question was, ultimately, what does the city of NCH want to see done with this building? Again, invoking the taxpayers. She said, what do the taxpayers want? And we need to include that in our decision and see what is going to cost to remodel. Ms. Dukes-Dean then responded, she's not trying to ignore what the citizens want, but we, council, hold the purse strings. It was at that point when I said I was astonished that any council members had made a decision, because we don't have any numbers to back up that decision. And I was flabbergasted that we have the purse strings, but yet we don't have any firm numbers. I then asked, how much does the asbestos remediation cost? I've seen the RWB estimate, but that amount does not align with the encumberment amount, so I didn't understand that, so I needed that to be explained to me. How much does it cost to tear down the building? I asked, how much does it cost to fully renovate and bring it up to code? I asked what it would be the intended uses. What revenue will we get from that use? How many staff members would it take to support the assumed programs? What would their estimated salaries be? How would it be paid for? Would that be a bond or a levy? And the good bones, I question that because I drove past it and I saw the bricks on the west end of the exterior are now popping, and I didn't see any of that mentioned on any of the estimates. So I guess I'm wondering when council, if this is already legislation that council is supposed to evaluate for voting, when should council expect the answers to the questions? I'd also like to clarify something else that was stated in the finance meeting. In 2017, council absolutely passed an ordinance to replace the office side of the West Galbraith roof, and that was for $276,000. Another question I have is regarding the splash pad. So the city is currently invested right around $350,000 total, and that includes demolition of buildings that were already there, new play features, water and sewer infrastructure, and a new parking lot. I think I have the whole list. I may not. But we spent $350,000. We have until June to use the free $55,000 from the CDBG funds. So I want to know what the plan is that we don't lose those $55,000. And then my last and final comment would be, I know it's starting to rain a lot. Spring brings rain. And so there's a lot of leaf debris and winter debris and mess in the gutters. So I'm wondering when the street sweeping schedule will resume to get the gutters cleaned out before they clog up all the storm sewers and we have flooding in our neighborhoods. That is all I have. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you,
Mr.
Ms. Zorb.
President,
Ms. Dukes-Dean?
may I address some of the concerns that Ms. Zorb has?
Sure.
I'll go backwards. So the street sweeper was when we got it back from Amberley Village, because we leased out the street sweeper to Amberley Village and Mount Healthy. It was needing a repair. So it is in disrepair, well, it's being repaired at this time. And then we will resume the schedule that was submitted to you before. So, and actually, in transparency, we don't actually lease out. We have an agreement with Amberley Village. We use some of their major equipment, and then they use some of ours. It's kind of an equipment exchange. So it's being repaired. It was on a backlist to be repaired probably for like 2 months during the winter months, and they had to get the parts ordered. As for the splash pad and $350,000, a large portion of that was grant monies. We never actually said that we would use the ARPA funds for that, but it is a possibility that we could. Some of these questions, I'm a little surprised because we did answer them in Budget and Finance, specifically the amount of the PO and what it encompassed. I specifically said that there were a list of projects that we could do at 1,500 or the splash pad. This is why we encumbered it the way that we did. For example, I listed specifically the fire hydrant. I talked about the Public Works dome where the salt was. I talked about needing to remediate the asbestos, whether we remove the mold or not. And I also talked about the splash pad. I talked about there's a lot of small projects that could absorb the $480,000 very, very easily that we could choose. The reason why, well, I won't say the reason, but you all did agree to push the legislation to the ballot in the same way that you talked about pushing the comprehensive plan. You said, let's just put it on the council floor and let the vote speak for itself. I did get a lot of questions from different council members, and I answered them as best as I could. There are not numbers for the salaries and the of what would be in the building because you haven't actually determined what you're going to do with the building. So we've got some issues with the building, as I discussed in budget and finance. And one is, if you remediate the mold, you also need to if you remediate the asbestos, you also need to remediate the mold. You don't want to have people come back out in separate places to do that because it would cost us almost double. It's not the best use of our resources. We also talked about this not being a permanent stay in the senior building. We talked about the quotes that were given to at least get us back in the building healthily, the environmental studies that would be done. We're not at the point where we're planning for the recreation. We're at the point of just trying to get the building back to a solid place so that we don't have to demo it. If you want to demo it, then my suggestion is that you vote no on the piece of legislation. The piece of legislation is to deal with the intention. I also talked about if we were to run into anything in the discovery space that would hinder us from going forward, that I would bring that information back and you would be able to. I cannot make the promises of research that Ms. Chamberlain committed to. One, in total transparency, I think she was very new and not knowing the extent of what her promises were committing to in that space. I also know that we have to determine the road for the city building as we discover more. You can get an estimate, get an assessment of the structure, and still run into problems that are unseen. We have to get into there and figure out what it is. We need to preserve a space for what I would like to preserve, and I'm not one person, but I think the interest of the community should be reserving a space for Historical Society, which will open us up to additional grants. The American Legion, she sits here today. DAV was here, they left. They add a tremendous benefit to our community. We have aborted their space and our mutual space. They have, I can tell you DAV has a grant specifically, and I answered this in one of Ms. Gaston's questions that they will use to repair their floors, and the rest of it will repair floors in the building. So they're even looking for dollars that can come through or filter through some of those auxiliaries that have previously existed. There is expansion programs that need to happen with the senior center that we're not able to do because we occupy the space, and council's layout absorbs that. So then there is, if we demo the building because Public Works is attached to that, what do we do with the Public Works space, the impound lot? So yes, there are things that say that it is, I had, in the spirit of the vote that we took, the motion that was made for Ms. Chamberlain to continue to research, I had those initial contractors come back out and reassess to see, based on the length of time from the first quote to the where we are now, to reassess the status of the building, because it could change, because the weather has been harsh. Things have, it's just been sitting there. So buildings tend to dilapidate and have further destruction when they're sitting empty. And so I wanted to make sure that we were still in a space to go forward. Just because you see bricks coming down on the side, which I also discussed in budget and finance, does not mean that that's the structure. The structure is the foundation, the things that hold the building up. The bricks are the pieces of things that are on it. Those can easily be replaced. You don't want the structure. That's the skeleton, the bones of something to be breaking down. That is not the bricks. And so I know that I didn't touch on all of Ms. Zorb's questions, but what you all agreed to in the budget and finance meeting is to push the legislation with the intent of making sure that we were moving in the direction of rehabilitation, so that we would not be spending money to remediate the mold, come back later, remediate the asbestos, and then come back or abate the asbestos and then remediate the mold and double charge. And so if there is a discovery that this isn't the right direction, at that point, all we've invested is the abatement of the asbestos and the transparency that we cannot continue to rebuild the building. You all have to consider that Public Works would be displaced if you demolished. There was questions about a rebuild that I asked, Ms. Gaston asked about. We have a tall cost to rebuild, to tear down and rebuild. We are not in the financial state to do that. So whatever it is, not discarding what the citizens want or feel like the city needs, but to understand that the finances also will dictate our steps. If we are not healthy enough to support a $9,000 or a $9 million, $8 million loan, that is not something we would want to pursue, but we still need a building. If you guys want to demolish it and be charged $1 million, that is your choice, but we have to also figure out what we're going to do with Public Works, because they would be displaced.
Mr. President, can I say something?
Mr. Dieters?
I think obviously we've had many changes that happen in the city in the last 12 months, but I'm coming at this from my experience in working with school districts when they build major projects like $100 million projects and facilities. I don't think anybody in this room, at least I don't think so, is an expert in building and construction and public building and uses and financing and funding it and all those things. I think the best thing to do would be for the city to put out a request for proposals from architectural firms that specialize in public construction, and to take a look at our building and then part of what we want them to do is take a look at the building, assess it, talk about what its potential uses could be. Those companies are well experienced and skilled at doing focus groups, getting people involved to talk about what you want that building to be for your city. They're very good at giving you identifications of what ballpark cost will be. So if you want X, Y, or Z, you can expect that you're going to be spending this kind of money. What they also are very good at, because remember, if I'm an architect and I build schools, or I build public city halls or firehouses or whatever, I'm not going to build a lot if I don't help my client secure the funding to be able to build those projects, right? So those companies are also very good at, they have people that seek grants, they have people that help with levies if you need to do a bond issue. They're good at knowing how to get access to public financing abilities. They have all those expertise. And so I feel like we've kind of been trying to plug all these holes in this dam, and we ought to just go ahead and invest the money, even if it's a decent amount of an initial investment, just to find out, is it doable? Is it not doable? What could it be? What could it not be? And we just haven't been able to get the momentum to do that. But I think what Arias had me draft was, if you want us to do that, pass this thing of intent, and then we can work with an ad hoc committee from council perhaps to go out and do a request for proposals, look at those proposals, narrow it down to 3 companies, maybe have a special meeting, have them come in and give a half-hour presentation to you as a council of what they can do and what their capabilities are. And then, you know, if it's a $25,000 cost or something, we have money from the ARPA funds that we could help cover that. And that money could be used for that. And then you could make a decision, you know, what's best for the city and how do you cost it out. But if we don't, we need help in that process. That's what I think for whatever it's worth.
Mr. President, I'd also like to add one more thing to the comment. You know, agree or disagree to our current political environment. Building materials are going up. Inflation is going up. Things are only going to get worse with the building. We have to at least stop the damage. And so that's the only thing that I'm trying to move on. What the rest of the building entails, I don't want to not do that without your input. I'm just saying to you all that there is an immediate need to do something, even if you just decide to tear it down, but you need to understand the consequences of tearing it down. One, that leaves us with a bill that we have to pay with nothing else. There's no building, and we will have to deal with a displaced group of our employees.
Mr. President?
Ms. Zorn?
So, Mr. Dieters, I appreciate what you said, because I would fully support hiring an architect. I see nothing in this legislation that says anything about hiring an architect. Actually, to the contrary, it says that the city has already received informal assessments by qualified building contractors and architects. So I haven't seen anything from an architect.
Well, I think all we had was those assessments that you looked at, but those are not comprehensive assessments. They're just, you know, things about very, very piecemeal kind of thing. So I'm saying that I think you should approach it as a comprehensive process, and that resolution just allows that process to go forward.
See, I don't read this the way you're explaining it.
Correct. Mr. President?
All right, we'll move on to Ms. Gaston.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to give preliminary results of the 1500 West Galbraith survey. And I know it's going to sound redundant because we kind of talked about it for a minute, but I'm just going to go through it really, really quickly. So the first question, everybody who has taken it, those who are watching online, the first question was, is anyone aware of the projects that are going on in this city? And 57% of those citizens who completed the survey stated that they are not aware of community projects. Okay. Number 2, the top choice for community service in this area was at 57% youth development and closely following family engagement. Those are the top 2 things that everyone is really wanting to see happen in our community. As far as the city center goes, 79% stated that they would visit the city center at least one time a year. So I think that's important to note because people want to come to something. They want to go and be with their neighbors, have their children have fun, so on and so forth. 65% of the citizens who completed the survey want the 1500 West Galbraith Road building cleaned up and torn down. 42% of citizens would like a new city center in place of once it's torn down, if that's what council decides. What was really unique about this opportunity for question number 5 was people had the option to say what they wanted. 32 individuals provided additional feedback, and most of the responses, they want a city center to cater to the community, period. There's 32 responses that were excellent ideas. And the top 4 choices that people want to see in the city center, community rooms and multi-purpose rooms for people outside of council and administration, so they can go and have communal spaces to work. I work from home. You know I work from home, and I would like to not be in my living room sometimes. So I would go in and poke my head into a Reese and say hi and go into a room, right? Other people want that opportunity too. 66% of those who took the survey want that. Closely following, open gym, full court. Again, communal office spaces open to citizens, DAV and the Historical Society, and 37 additional comments sharing other ideas about community connection. And lastly, 71% of those who took the survey said they would love to participate in a town hall so that they can better learn about the process and give their ideas if and when asked. Removing the blighted and hazardous structures will transform the landscape of our community and open the door for future economic development. It is my hope and my prayer that we as council make the best decision for our citizens with the resources that are available to us, whatever that looks like. So I appreciate you, Mr. Dieters, for sharing your piece, because I was not aware that if we hired a firm or whatever, that they could help us look for more money. That is something that we all need to know. So thank you to everybody who was continuing to take the survey. It'll be open a little bit longer, and your voices will be heard. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Gaston. Ms. Chichester, you're up.
I think, Chief Strand, did you want to say something before I start?
Yeah, I don't know if council's aware. When Ms. Iki was here, she brought in a architecture firm, and I was part of 3 meetings. I don't know where that documentation went, but I was part of 3 different meetings about them doing 1500 and what it would look like if the police department went there, or what it would look like if we did stuff at 1646 for the police department. The same time frame, Interim Chief Flackey had also worked on the bricks grant and was nearing completion of that when that administration failed to provide him with documentation that would have enabled us to get that grant. So the work has been done. We just need to find some of the documentation if it is available. It may be at 1500, but I know I was put in charge of our portion of what it would look like for the police department if we did stuff at our place. And like I said last week, we desperately need it too. Every facility needs it. I mean, our water heater just went out this weekend. Luckily, from a major drug bust we made, we have a tankless water heater that is now ours because it's property that is turned over to us as a forfeiture. So we're going to repurpose that for our liking, but that's the type of stuff we're dealing with. So
I'm sorry.
just want to make sure that everyone's aware that has been done.
It's hard when you have constant turnover all the time. And I don't think anyone up here is trying to hinder the process of moving forward and doing what's right. Again, not to blow up Ms. Dustine's head, but I think that she's going to be here. She's going to work with us, and we're going to move forward. So I'm confident that going forward, the people who are sitting up here and with you all, we're going to make a good decision for the citizens. That's all.
Mr. President.
Before we move any further, I want to advise everybody that this is not discussion time. We are in call of members, and people have decided to just speak out. We want to continue to respond to things, and I'd like to continue with our meeting and the call of members, and it is Ms. Chichester's turn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to say thank you to the Women's American Legion for coming today, and the DAV. They were here. They were on my notes to thank them. It's always a pleasure seeing them in the audience. And I wanted to give my condolences to my neighbor, Mr. Weber. He will truly be missed. He was a gem in NCH. I think he said he was here when the cross-county highway was built. And the art community lost a truly talented artist. And also, I just want to reiterate that I don't think we're making any decisions today on the building. I think we're making the decision to remediate the environmental, and then we can further have discussion on the usage of it and have the town hall meeting. I think I've been saying that for a while, and I think the best course of action would be possibly getting an expert to come in and some documents to stating those things. But those are just my 2 cents. Mr. President, I'm done.
Thank you. Ms. Alexander?
I just don't want to continue kicking the can. I don't want to be in this same spot come July, and we're still debating, are still waiting for the abatement and the asbestos. We want to do what's right for the city. They're going to be somebody who's going to say we made the wrong decision. You know, somebody is going to say, hey, I'd rather us to, we should have created a whole new building. And then you're going to have the side that says we should have rehabbed it. We just need to, make a decision. It's getting worse. Time is of the essence. The longer we wait, on whatever side we do, it's going to cost more money. And I just don't want to, I just feel like we've discussed this for so long. And I like the idea of getting an architect. And I feel like once we do that, let's just go ahead and do what we need to do. Because we need our facility back. The citizens need, the facility back. The seniors need this facility back. I feel like we've kind of taken advantage of this building, and it's not become a priority because we have a temporary place. So this is a temporary place, but we have other people besides ourselves that we need to think about. We need to think about the DAV. We need to think about the Historical Society, the Public Works. I don't like that they're in the building, whatever side they're on, and, this building is dilapidated. We need to really pursue quick kicking this can and make some decisions. And let's go forth with the architect if that's what everybody wants to do. They're the professionals. I don't know anything about remodeling except, making a new step or something like that. But we need to go ahead and make a decision on what we're going to do, with the building. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Yes. I'm going to say this, because it's clear as day. Since I've been appointed back in June, something we have been working on is the 1500 building. The fact of the matter is that building is in standable condition, meaning that it will stand until 2040. What we have to do is we have to remodel the building. You know what I'm saying? We can put it in the best condition that we can as far as the people that will be in there, which our goal is to bring everyone that was in that building back and more. The goal of the building is to be what it's called. It's called a city center. And so the ideal is to make it the center for our citizens of our community. So, they should be able to come there and find what they need, the necessary things that they need in that center, whether it be fire, police, administrative assistance, just normal assistance, and whether it be homeless assistance or just direction to bring yourself to the need to feel like a citizen here in North College Hill. That's the primary goal for that building. It is not in the best interest for North College Hill to tear that building down and start from scratch. It just won't help us because we don't have the money to do so. But I believe from finance that they pointed out that we are in the position to fix that building in a way we can use it in the manner we can till we get in the position to be able to replace it totally. That's all I have to say, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Davis?
All right. Speaking on behalf of Motion NCH, we had we met on March 13th, and we'll meet again on April 10th. We had an ownership conversation, and this comes from the handbook about the ownership conversation. Community will be created the moment we decide to act as the creators of what it can become. This requires us to believe in the possibility that this organization, neighborhood, community, city, et cetera, is mine or ours to create. This will occur when we're willing and able to answer the question, how have I contributed to creating the current reality? Confusion, blame, and waiting for someone else to change the current reality are a defense against ownership and personal power. Once again, Motion NCH, April 10th. We'll be right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Underwood?
Thank you, Mr. President. A new city center built from the ground up with at least 3 levels, a community center, a swimming pool, a fire department, a new fire department, a new police department, a new public works building, new council chambers, a mayor, which would include mayor's court and a new clerk's office, the community center with a walking track, community rooms, event space, and a skating rink. Those are all on my wish list. However, we do not have the money in the bank to buy it. It is like, I would love to have a brand new Louis Vuitton, whatever purse. I don't have $2,500 to drop on a purse. So I don't have one. So we have to keep in mind what our resources are and move in that space. That being said, what I heard at our budget and finance meeting was that we have some money that if we don't use it, we are going to lose it. And I will say that we spend more time talking about and arguing about what to do, what not to do, blah, 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 blah. But what I took out of that meeting was there are hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. And I can't afford to give away $10 and just give it back to the person who offered, much less hundreds of thousands of dollars. What we can do is we can remediate that building, remediate the asbestos and the mold, and then decide. But what we cannot do is leave $300,000 or $400,000 on the table or give it back. We cannot afford to do that. So that's all I'm saying. We have been talking about this building for almost a year. I'm with Ms. Alexander on that. And we are elected by the citizens to make decisions on their behalf. That is what elections are for. And what I would implore is, if you don't like that, either pull petitions and run for council, or, we need to make a decision. That's what we need to do. Up, down, right or wrong, left or right, whatever, we need to make a decision. And that is why my colleagues and citizens, I said I have made my decision, because a decision needs to be made. We cannot, my decision is that we are not giving back $400,000 or whatever it is, okay? We cannot do that. We can't afford to do that. That's all I have.
Thank you. That'll bring us to remarks from the audience. Mr. Hedger, who do we have signed in this evening?
We have Sandy Ficker.
Please state your name and your address, Ms. Ficker, and then you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Sandy Ficker, 6790 Richard Avenue. I was going to talk about all this, but I'm not even going to touch it. I've got an opinion about it. You guys have covered a lot of it. My only request is to consider this, the residents of North College Hill, what we want, what we need. We don't need a Blue Ash. We don't need a Springdale. We need what we need. And hopefully the architect can help us to pull in all that together and make suggestions, and also to also to accommodate all this in the future too. We have to consider that. We have to look beyond. We not to put out fires, but to consider taking care of it. Enough said. But I also had one issue that Chief Cheney and I discussed, and he's going to take care of it. I've noticed a rash of vehicles that are parking in their front yards. There are 2 areas on Galbraith Avenue. There's one resident, I don't know the address, but I can tell you what the house looks like. They have a driveway. There's space in the driveway, but they decide to pull in front of their house. There's an ordinance that I looked it up. It's illegal, and I've asked Chief Cheney to take care of it for me, but I thought you guys need to be aware of it. I don't want North College Hill looking like a ghetto, and this is one step towards it, and I just wanted to bring it up. Another thing, I brought a charter, and someone already talked about the charter. I have a charter from 2006, and I was wondering if we had an updated one yet. Do we have a copy of it?
What's your email address?
What's my address?
Email.
Email. I'll give it to you at the end of the meeting. But that's what I brought. And also, when it was created, I'm sure, Karen, is that your name? She's got a copy of a smaller version that was sent out to the residents. This was back in 2006. So I don't know if you want to consider sending out a mailing to the residents. I know we get newsletters now from the mayor, but that was just a thought, consideration. But yeah, you guys are doing a good job, and you just got to make a decision on this. I mean, I know you've been kicking the can, and it's frustrating to everybody. I mean, and I'm sure the residents are wondering what's going on. And if you need help, I'll complain and help you too.
Thank you.
You guys got a job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ficker. I do believe that the latest edition of the charter is on the website.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
You don't have a printed copy that way?
I have a printed copy that I keep with me, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you.
All right, Mr. Hedger, who do we have next?
Kathy Cureton.
Blessed be. Kathy Curitan, 6718 Devonwood Drive, North College Hill, Ohio, 45224, proud resident of North College Hill. Ms. Chichester, it is my understanding that Icon Property Rescue provided an estimate to remove the mold and asbestos. Did that include the renovation as well? If so, what is that total cost to renovate the building? Equally, it is my understanding that Burgess and Nyepel also provided an estimate to remove the asbestos and the mold in April of 2024. Did their estimate include the renovation of the city center? And if so, what is that total cost to renovate? Equally, Ms. Dukestein, Ms. Anderson emailed me on February 20th, 2025, and she advised me there is a not to exceed in place with RWB. What are the guidelines of that RWB, not to exceed? Why would there be a not to exceed if there's nothing that we're going to do or execute with them? All of it is still a discussion. I know also, Ms. Dukestein, that the $480,000 is not just a random number. And I don't think that we all have to agree whether we want to tear it down, whether we want to renovate it. I believe that citizens just want to know, how much is this going to cost us? We have a fire levy coming up. We have this that can potentially impact our taxes. We just want to know, how much will this restoration cost citizens of North College Hill? And if you can advise, because we all now know there is something on the PO report from December 31st of $480,000 with RWB. What is that? Like, they can't just randomly say this is the number. There has to be something in exchange, especially if there is a not to exceed in place. Equally with that, Ms. Chichester, thank you for suggesting we should have that town hall. In fact, we talked about it in January. I have an email from January the 28th. You said that you would schedule it Here we are, 45 days later, and no town hall has been scheduled for citizens. No feedback has been given for citizens. I don't know how many citizens in this room right now have been able to weigh in whether they are for or against the restoration, demolition, whatever for the senior city center. How many citizens of North College Hill have weighed in on this and actually were heard? And then lastly, I want to just make a comment regarding the phases of a project. Mr. Wilson, do you know the phases of a project? Do you know the planning and feasibility? Do you know any of the phases of a project? I'm going to say that you don't know.
30 seconds.
Yes, sir. So I want to say passing legislation and starting a project on behalf of 9,000 citizens without fully disclosing the total cost and without qualified engineers and architects. Mr. Dieters, I agree with you. We need qualified engineers. We need qualified architects, no matter the approach. It is undoubtedly risky. In fact, none of us are engineers, none of us are architects, and none have given us any numbers for the city center. It's actually very embarrassing that we would move forward without doing so. All facts, including the cost, the transparency, presented to the public so we can know how much it's going to cost. Failing to do so seriously raises concerns about potential hidden agendas. As citizens of North College Hill, we trust and we hope that no one is pushing forward this agenda with a hidden, undisclosed motive. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
I'll take the easy town hall question. When we initially asked me about the town hall, I think it was council's decision to do the survey in place of that. And so I backed off of it because everyone wanted to do the survey instead of a town hall. So I had to go with what majority rules. Is not what I want, is what best for the city and what the citizens ask for. So if they're re-asking for a town hall, I just stated that when we did the call of members, that it doesn't make, I think I said this in the other meeting as well, it doesn't make sense for me to host a town hall until I get all the complete answers to questions first. And we'll just be having this meeting again as a bigger forum as a town hall. So now that it's spring and we're getting closer to a lot of the answers, maybe we can revisit that decision if my colleagues all agree. I can't do it alone.
I just want to add to that because you did mention how many citizens have had input, and we did do the survey, and I know that the survey is not a town hall. I'm not saying it is, but how many respondents did we have to the survey?
So far, we have 90 responses.
So 90 citizens have put input in through there, so.
Mm-hmm.
How many residents do we have?
9,000.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wilson?
I just want to address the comment stated to me. I'm going to let you know that I'm not no professional. I don't run out and do the architect of any building or anything, but I do have knowledge of construction because I'm a certified mechanic. I also work in the construction field. So I've had 5, maybe 7 years of construction understanding. So I do know the phases of that as far as what it would take, you know, for someone to go in and evaluate and see what the cost would be to put it, you know, to repair a building or tear it down. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not a professional. I don't go out and make estimates and give out them billing for that, but I do have some knowledge.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I believe this young lady had a couple of more seconds left in her comment. And can we just give her an opportunity for her last 30 seconds that she had of her 3 minutes?
Sure.
To the podium, please.
Saw your hand.
I was curious, how many residents do we have? How many citizens?
9,000.
Do you know?
I thought it was 10,000.
Between 9 and 10, yeah.
Yeah, 10,000.
10,000.
Okay. And only 90 people?
Well, Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
real short. So the QR code and the link is going to be in the mayor's newsletter where all the citizens will receive that newsletter. It hasn't gone out yet, so that's why I said it was preliminary. This is just from the North College Hill Talk Group and neighbors. There were flyers at Kroger and the bank, so it's out there, but not everyone's on Facebook. So once the mayor's newsletter comes out and people read it and they have that opportunity, I'm sure we will get more.
What about a mailing?
Yep.
Have you done a mailing? I mean, I'm just asking, is there a mailing out there?
Well, the mayor's newsletter is going to be the mailing, and it'll be in there.
Okay. Thank you.
No, ma'am. All right. Is there anyone else signed up to speak this evening?
No, Mr. President.
Thank you. We'll go to legislation when you're ready, Mr. Hedger.
Second reading, resolution number 1, 2025, a resolution to approve a contract with Iron Mountain Capture Services.
Okay. I'll second.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'd like to make a motion to suspend readings on Resolution 1, 2025.
Mr. President,
Hang on. Being more specific, you want to suspend third reading.
Sorry, yes.
Ms. Underwood?
I'll second that.
Motion to suspend the third reading on Resolution 1, 2025 by Ms. Zorb, second by Ms. Underwood. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
is that per the amendment to remove that section for administration to be responsible for the organization of the documents?
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dieters, but I think we would have to amend it before we vote on it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we should suspend the reading and then the third reading and then amend the contract and make the necessary amendment and then vote on it.
Any other discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Alexander?
did we ever find out whether they're going to scan it or they're still expecting us to come in and, well, not scan it, but sort it? I know we had discussion on whether they can just scan it and then we digitally categorize it, or are they still expecting us to come in and piece by piece organize that? I need to know that before I vote.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger, if you'd like to repeat yourself from what you said earlier tonight.
Yes, so removing the organization, that is how the contract is currently stated with Iron Mountain. Removing that is not in the contract for them to just take all documents and scan them. If they did such a thing, the way I believe they would do it is it would be one giant document. It would not be individual pieces. It would then have to be somehow segregated out from each document. Someone read through thousands of pages of documents to then organize that. I think that would be very difficult to do. That's not something I'm willing to do. So if we do that, we scan it, what good does that do to have a scanned document of 10,000 pages? That's my consideration.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
I'm gonna kick myself for this, but in order to not have this contract expire and then we have to waste more money and going back and do another contract and prices increases, I volunteer to help Mr. Hedger scan, organize the documents.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hedger?
what I did state to Ms. Dukestein, because she asked this question via email, was I do think it would be possible to organize these documents if we had volunteers either from administration, pay them overtime if that's what's required, or if they could volunteer. It's obviously up to his administrations. Ask council to help with the organization of these documents. We have over 10 file cabinets in the back that need to be organized into a way that they can scan it. As it is now, they will not accept the documents. No company that I've spoken to will accept the documents how they are currently presented. So without some type of organization, this project will not proceed.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Hedger, what conditions are the documents in right now?
And they're in a very, excuse me, Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
They're in a range of conditions. Some are organized in binders. I would say the most recent ones are organized in binders by year, typically by agenda, communications, resolutions, ordinances, things of that nature. But there are also documents that are just loose in boxes and file cabinets with no real discernible organization.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wilson?
So you're telling me that these documents are in an area that's just thrown in there? They're not organized? They don't have like year to date on them or nothing? Like, so are they just...
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
They are in file cabinets, and there are organization in the file cabinets, but when you go through the documents, there are lots that don't have organization or don't actually belong in that file. So it does require some discernment to go through and organize them. At least try to get them by year, I would say, and possibly segregate out resolutions and ordinances would be my main priority, to have it so we have a easy searchable document so we can say, okay, here's all the resolutions, here's all the ordinances. Everything else, not as important as I would say those two pieces of documents are, but that's current conditions.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
I'd like to add that the employees they don't want the overtime, and that would be Saturday time. You have to consider that not everybody, unless you're putting in this piece of legislation that they're required to do the overtime, and we haven't, the office staff typically don't absorb overtime. We have not budgeted for that.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'll withdraw my motion, or my second to the motion.
All right, now we have a motion on the floor to suspend third reading on Resolution 1, 2025. Needs a second.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
I second that motion.
All right, motion to suspend third reading on Resolution 1, 2025 by Ms. Zorb, second by Ms. Chichester. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb.
Yes.
Ms. Gaston.
Yes.
Ms. Chichester.
Yes.
Ms. Alexander.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
No.
Motion passed 6-1.
All right, we've suspended a reading.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I make a motion, we adopt Resolution 1, 2025, a resolution to approve a contract with Iron Mountain Document Capture Services.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
I second.
Mr. President.
Discussion, Mr. Hedger.
I did want to say to council, what I am wanting this to be is hopefully it would be one day I would come in earlier, set up, basically take everything out of the file cabinets, hopefully with the help of some thankful council member volunteers to help organize this, take it all out, try to at least get it by year, and then set someone at a place to say, is this a resolution, is this an ordinance, and then separate them, put them into boxes, and we send it off. That's what's really required from this.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
my only request is that everyone's schedule is taken into consideration when picking the day, the Saturday day, to come in and do that. I would be willing to help as long as I'm asked what day works best for all of council who volunteers.
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wilson?
I just want to know, can we get breakfast?
Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. Council will be coming in to organize council's portion of the documents, which are currently, will not be accepted in their current form by this company. Is that right?
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger?
That's correct. We've spoken to 3 other firms, and the way we've explained these documents in the current conditions, they won't accept it in this manner. It has to be organized into some manner that they don't have staff that can discern what a resolution is, what an ordinance is, and how to scan it. they could scan, like I said, all the documents into one file or several files because it'd probably be too large. But then how do we separate and read through 10,000 pages?
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood, did you have something?
Ms. Dukestein?
Or, I'm sorry, Ms.
It's
Dukestein.
okay.
It's getting late.
I may be remiss here, but I'm just trying to make sure that you made a motion for the resolution as is, and that's obligating administration. The overtime is not in the budget, and these are not our files. These are yours.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood,
I move to amend,
I currently have a motion and a second on the floor to adopt.
okay.
I'll
well, yeah, there you
rescind
go.
my motion.
I rescind my second.
All right, motion rescinded.
Okay, Mr. President,
Hold on. All right, Ms. Underwood.
I move that we amend either the contract or the resolution, or both, whatever is needed, that we remove the requirement for administration or any employee to help organize these documents.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
I'll second with a question. Can we amend someone else's contract?
Is there anything in the contract, Mr. Dieters, that, or Mr. Hedger, that says that administration's doing this?
Mr. President, what
Mr. Hedger?
would need to happen is you would just need to strike section 2 from the
Of the resolution.
Yes.
Not the contract.
Okay, so
Mr.
I
President.
move to amend my motion to strike, what now?
Section 2.
Section 2.
Section 2 from the resolution.
Mr. President,
I believe Ms. Zorb made a second, pending a question being answered.
Yes,
Was your question answered?
it was. Thank you.
Did you make a second then?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, I don't want to ask, but is there any discussion?
Mr. President.
Ms. Chichester?
I just wanted to clarify if we removed the responsibility of organizing the documents from administration, does that mean the responsibility falls on council?
Yes, it does.
Wanted to clarify that, so I make sure everyone is aware of that.
Ms. Underwood?
I am along the lines of what Ms. Gaston said. Please do not put something in my calendar without checking with me first, the way that the judges of Hamilton and Butler County do. I would appreciate a phone call or just checking with me. I am happy to put on some sweatpants and come and help, but just please check with me before we pick a day.
All right, motion by Ms. Underwood, second by Ms. Zorb to amend Resolution 1, 2025, removing the requirement for the administration to participate. That is striking Section 2. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'd like to make a motion, we adopt Resolution 1, 2025,
Mr. President.
As amended.
as amended. Sorry.
Motion by Ms. Zorb to adopt Resolution 1, 2025 as amended. Ms. Gaston?
I second.
Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
it's more of a statement than a discussion. I do know that it was probably 2 or 3 years ago now, Ms. Dewald, when she was the clerk, she and I spent a day in 1500, and we put a lot of that stuff in envelopes. So I'm going to say some of that has already been sorted. So it's not
Recent years.
everything, because a lot of it has been sorted. I've already spent a day doing it.
feel better.
Motion to adopt Resolution 1, 2025, as amended by Ms. Zorb, second by Ms. Gaston. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you. Next reading.
Second reading resolution number 2, 2025, a resolution authorizing the Recreation Director to prepare and submit an application for an urban forestry grant through the State of Ohio Department of Natural Resources and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I believe at our last meeting, we were told that there is a timeline on this also, and so with that in mind, I will make a motion that we suspend the third reading.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
I second.
Motion by Ms. Zorb, second by Ms. Gaston to suspend third reading on Resolution 2, 2025. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'd like to make a motion, we adopt Resolution 2, 2025, a resolution authorizing the Recreation Director to prepare and submit an application for an urban forestry grant through the State of Ohio Department of Natural Resources and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Ms. Alexander?
I'd second that.
Motion by Ms. Zorb to adopt Resolution 2, 2025, second by Ms. Alexander. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you. Next reading.
First reading resolution number 3, 2025, a resolution to proceed with expressing the city council's intent to renovate the city building located at 1500 Galbraith Road.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood,
I have a question for the city manager.
go ahead.
Ms. Dukestein, what is the amount of money that we have that if we don't use it, we will lose it? What is that amount, and what is it the date that we have to use it by? And then also, I would like to confirm that regardless of whether we keep the building standing or tear the building down, that we in fact have to remediate the asbestos and the mold before we do that.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
we do not have to remediate the mold if we plan to demolish the building. We do have to
Abate the
abate
asbestos.
the asbestos. However, if you don't do them together, you will get double the cost. The amount of money that is dedicated, all the ARPA funds were in the amount of $860,000. The amount dedicated to that could be put to this project was the $480,000 number that you saw. If in the date that we have to use it, we have to be started on the project by July. We don't have to have it finished up and used, but we need to be started on the project.
Okay, so Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I know I'm asking you a million questions. I just want to make sure I understand. If we don't use that money,
We have to return
we have
it.
to give it back.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
I have a question. Does it matter that it says 1500 Galbraith Road? Because to my knowledge, it's 1500 West Galbraith Road. Should that be corrected, or it doesn't matter?
Mr.
It doesn't
Peters?
matter.
Okay, cool.
Mr. Dieters acknowledged that it does not matter.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Dukestein?
and I'd like to add, I empathize with you trying to make a good decision. It's not anyone's fault sitting in this particular room that we are where we are in this moment. There were a lot of steps missed. The money should have been encumbered well before I started, but it wasn't. So we have a pressing matter on our hands. We have to make a good decision based on the circumstances that we are dealing with right at this moment. The building is also getting worse. So the press is to make sure that we are making a decision that can allow us to make other decisions and not kick the can down the road as we've done in the past. If the building worsens, then, and we take a turn where it's no longer feasible to restore the building, then we have that on our hands and we have no choice but to demolish. And then we also have this scenario with the ARPA funds. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew what you were up against, because you do need to make an informed decision. It's not because I'm trying to rush you or promoting that you be rushed. It's because we are in a circumstance without any fault of the people sitting here that we have to make a quicker decision.
Mr. President?
Ms. Gaston, real quick, in any of your 90 responses, did anybody say they'd like to just watch this building fall down on its own? Because
Oh, no.
okay, because that's the only way that we don't have to do this asbestos. So let's be clear about that. That has to be done either way.
Period.
And I don't want to watch the building fall down. I don't imagine anybody else does either. Ms. Chichester,
I was
Gave people ideas.
going to ask Ms. Dukestein a question.
go ahead.
Ms. Dukestein, you said we have till July
To get started.
to get started. But what's the time frame council has to make the decision in order to hire, get contracts, and get things, like, how long do you think that process takes?
I think that we would need to start on it right away.
Okay.
And so that's why we need to make a decision about the intent for this. So if you were asking me, I would actually suspend the readings.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
Ms. Dukestein, when does the estimates that we received 10 months ago, will they expire in 2 months, or will we
They've
have to-
already expired.
Already expired.
I've already retained more of them. I was planning to share them with you at the Budget and Finance meeting that's coming up.
Okay. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the second and third readings.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wilson?
I'd like to second.
Motion to suspend second and third readings on Resolution 3, 2025 by Ms. Chichester, second by Mr. Wilson. Any other discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'd like to make 2 points of clarification. I know Ms. Underwood asked how much the ARPA funds were, and I believe the answer was $840 or something like that. And while that is accurate, the money for that we passed the ordinance for to encumber was only $480. Not, I shouldn't say only $480, but it's not the 8 something. It's the $480 that would be lost on this. Just to be clear. The other thing that at least it's my opinion, and again, I'm not an engineer, but if we do the mold remediation but do nothing with the roof, won't the mold just grow back? That's my only point.
All right. Motion to suspend second and third readings, Resolution 3, 2025 by Ms. Chichester, seconded by Mr. Wilson. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
No.
Ms. Gaston,
No.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
No.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes, doesn't matter.
Motion failed 4-3.
Thank you, Mr. Hedger. Next reading.
First reading resolution number 4, 2025, yard beautification competition.
Thank you. Next reading.
First reading resolution number 5, 2025, a resolution to approve the City of North College Hill comprehensive plan.
All right, that is all we had by way of legislation this evening.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hedger.
I believe there is an additional piece of legislation
Oh,
for
you're
the
right.
amendment.
I didn't write that down when we did that. Sorry. Please go with the next reading. I apologize.
First reading resolution number 6, 2025, a resolution authorizing the city to prepare and submit an application for a violent crime reduction grant through the State of Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
Mr. Davis, I believe that this was something that Mr. Davis had submitted. I just want to kind of make it clear, that only if the chief of police and the city administrator are able to secure enough time to do that. I don't want them under some kind of, or compulsion to try to get this done within 2 days. Is that?
Mr. President?
Ms. Zorb.
So along those same lines, I'd like to ask Mr. Dieters, as long as this is a resolution and it says we are merely authorizing them to do this, that's not a mandate, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so us passing this is not forcing them to do anything. It's giving them the authority to do it if they so choose.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I move to suspend the second and third reading.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston.
I second.
Motion by Ms. Underwood, second by Ms. Gaston. To suspend second and third readings, Resolution 6, 2025. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes,
Motion passed 7-0.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I move that we adopt Resolution 6-2025.
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston.
I second.
Motion by Ms. Underwood, second by Ms. Gaston. To adopt Resolution 6, 2025. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes,
Motion passed 7-0.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is it for legislation. Thank you. All right, next is further remarks from the audience as it pertains to any of this legislation.
So I just wanted to clarify.
Please state your name and your
yes,
address.
sir. Yes, sir. Kathy Carrington, 6718 Devonwood Drive, North College Hill, Ohio, 45224. The fourth whereas on this piece of legislation, I just want to clarify, Mr. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me back up all the way up. Resolution number 3-2025, a resolution to proceed with expressing the city's council's intent to renovate the city building located at 1500 Garworth Road. Got it? Okay, cool. The fourth whereas states, the city has received informal assessments by qualified building contractors and architects. Can someone tell me who that is? Who is actually the qualified contractor and our architect? Okay, so I'm going to direct it to Ms. Chichester because this was in your committee. Ms. Chichester? I'm asking, I'm so sorry if you didn't hear me, who are the qualified building contractors and architects? So Mr. Dieters made a recommendation that the city would utilize qualified architects and even engineers before moving forward with this piece of legislation. This piece of legislation, this ordinance says, the city has received informal assessments by qualified building contractors and architects. Who are those architects and contractors?
Sorry, I shut my laptop down with the notes on there. Mr. Dieters, Mr. Dukestein.
Wasn't prepared to answer that question,
Yeah,
so I
I-
don't know.
Well, can you open your laptop back up? I mean, I understand, and I'll be very, very quick, but would you mind opening your laptop back up?
It's dead. That's why I closed it.
Would anyone else on council, by chance, happen to know?
Mr. President,
Have the documents.
I don't have the documents.
Mr. Wilson?
I was just wondering, do it really matter now that it failed? We
Yes,
gotta start
sir.
from scratch.
Suspension of the
Didn't fail.
readings failed.
The suspension only failed.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
President,
Do you have any other comments for this?
No, sir, but also, I'm just gonna assume that no one on council knows. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
That's not correct? Who said that?
I said that, Ms.
Oh,
Chavez.
I'm sorry.
What?
So you don't want to
They-
tell?
they-
Okay, no.
We're, it's not
Understood.
discussion time.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then that'll take us to old business.
Mr. President.
Ms. Underwood?
So I think I mentioned this earlier in the meeting about the devices, for council to use, and I'm just asking again, my colleagues for us to kind of make a decision about that. I know some people were issued laptops, and when I asked about the laptops for the couple of people who weren't issued laptops, we were told that, or we were advised that those laptops, we don't know where they are. So I think two things. Do we all want to have the same device? And if so, I think Ms. Dukestein mentioned that she had priced something that would be reasonable, that could accommodate our needs. And I just want to flesh that out since we're talking about VPNs and other, because I want to have access to the systems that are requested, but I cannot access those systems using my personal devices.
I did price. If you would like me to send you those quotes, I just need direction from you on what you want to do. I know that the last conversation, Ms. Zorb mentioned going the Teams route, which is a login. I have to add that I did speak with Mr. Wilson, Tom Wilson, and he said that is not our most secure route. However, you do have that as an option. So what I can do, and there was some conversation around talking with Mr. Hedger about his device, because he also uses a personal device. So I will send you out the quotes. You can make up in your decide which direction you guys want to go in, and kind of assess the cost. So those are the things that I can put on the table to help aid you with the decision, but I cannot make the decision for you.
Ms. Alexander?
You had, when we were talking about everyone having the same devices, those of us who were given a device, would we just give those back and the information just transferred over? And is that a requirement instead of just replacing or just, giving the people who don't have a device? As far as cost efficiency, since we already have, mine is fine. I don't have any issues with mine. Just trying to keep the budget in place.
If you would like, I can also price the device you have and purchase more of those. And I can provide you with purchasing everyone a new device. I just have to get what that is off of there.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Ms. Chichester?
do we need to buy 8, 9 new devices, or we just need to buy devices for the people who don't have them?
I think that's the question.
Yeah.
To get, everyone to have the same device. It would either be additional purchases of what you're existingly using for those that is not functioning appropriately and for those that do not have them, or it would be purchasing new devices for everyone.
I'm going to say the most cost-effective route.
So just provide us the options, please.
I will do that.
Thank you. Any other old business?
Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Ms. Gaston?
I live on Baywood, and I believe that there are about 13 kids on our street who love water. So my question is, where are we with the splash pad? When are we going to get started with that? What does that look like? Because I'm really interested in being there this summer potentially.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
it was my understanding that the contract expired for our, for the pricing that we were given for the splash pad. So the pricing that we initially had agreed to or approved or whatever we did, there was a deadline, and the deadline passed.
When was the deadline? I'm sorry, Mr. President.
That was during a prior city administrator's term. And so the cost of putting that same splash pad in has now more than tripled. Am I accurately describing that?
Yes, and I would like to add that is what is going to happen to the building if you all do not make a decision, because we have lots of inflation. I am telling you, Hamilton County, I met with OKI this week. I've met with different people. We are impending huge inflation. Everyone around us is preparing for it. That was another space in time where a decision was not made, and the cost tripled. It went from, I think it was 240,000 or 300, and there was something, and now it's almost at $1 million. So I'd like to just throw that in there about the indecisiveness.
Any other old business? All right, I have an item. So on May 20th of 2020, I wrote that down wrong. 2024, council passed a motion on the floor to create an Ask Council at northcollegehill.org email address. Since May 20th to February 11th, and give me a second here, I'll tell you why February 11th, we've received about 10 legitimate emails at that email address. As of February 11th, because of VPN and changes that were made to make it a shared account versus an account that was created by council to have myself and Mary Jo Zorb being the only people on it, I have not been able to access it since February 11th. So if emails have come to it since February 11th, I do not know. I am asking council, because I don't see the value in that email address. If people want to email me, or they want to email a member of council, or they want to email a member of the administration, those email addresses are available. I would like to ask council to make a vote to eliminate that email address.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I'd like to make a motion to squelch, remove, what word do I use?
Eliminate makes me happy.
Eliminate the Ask Council email address.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wilson?
I'll second that.
All right, motion to eliminate the Ask Council email address by Ms. Zorb, second by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb?
I would like to point out the, again, the retention factor of those emails. They still have to be.
I assume they're saved on the server.
Okay.
Correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, but that will be saved on the server, yes.
Perfect.
Mr. President.
Is that Ms. Dukestein? Sorry.
Yes. I also would like to point out, in terms of the all of this particular topic and some of the others that we touched on, there was an ask that I sent out the retention policy to you all, and I did so. I just wanted to make sure that you all saw that, and you're using that as a guidebook for how you keep documents.
All right, motion on the floor by Ms. Zorb to eliminate the Ask Council email address, second by Mr. Wilson. Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Sorb,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
No.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1.
Thank you. Last call for old business. Well, we'll move to new business.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
sorry, it's probably still back on the old business. Reviewing that Ms. Dukestein sent us that, I was wanted to confirm that Mr. Hedger got the retention policy also.
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger.
Yes, I've received it.
Thank you.
All right, any new business?
Mr. President.
Mr. Hedger.
I would like to schedule a working meeting with council to organize documents for council purposes.
You said you want to do this on a Saturday, correct?
It can't be the 22nd.
Mr.
Mr.
Hedger, I will
President.
make whatever day work, and I actually have another volunteer in my household that would be willing to come help us.
And any administration that would like to volunteer. Not to call you.
Ms. Underwood.
Start throwing out dates.
I'm going to assume that we'll actually have access to the building because right now our key fobs only work on the nights that we have council meetings. So I would hate to get myself woke up on a Saturday morning and show up and not be able to access the building because that would make me very, 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 very unhappy.
Now Ms. Dukestein has to be here.
Mr.
She
President.
does not, but
Ms. Chichester.
I have already contract engagements already for the next. I don't think I have a Saturday where I am not already working until April 26th. I am open on a Sunday.
Ms. Zorb, what is your availability?
I think I'm kind of in the Mr. Wilson camp. I cannot do the 22nd.
Ms. Gaston?
I can do a Sunday with Ms. Chichester anytime after 2 o'clock.
Sundays are out for me. Ms. Alexander?
Well, I can't do this Saturday. Possibly the next Saturday. I cannot do, like the 5th, I can't do first Saturdays of the month.
Mr. President,
Mr. Hedger?
what is council available on the 26th of April, since that's when Ms. Chichester is available on Saturday?
Mr. President,
Ms. Gaston?
I am not available on the 26th of April.
Neither am I. I have to teach a class.
We are never going to find a Saturday where we're all going to be available,
Yep.
so let me finish. Mr. Wilson, you said not this Saturday?
It's my birthday, and I'm
Okay.
not doing nothing on my birthday.
Mr. Davis?
I'm open either 22nd or 29th. I'm good.
Ms. Underwood?
whenever. As long as when I come and my key fob works, I'm
Okay.
good.
I'll be here the 29th, Mr. Hedger.
What time?
So who will, Mr. President?
Yep, so who can be here the 29th?
I'll be here.
What time?
What time? That's your party.
Okay, we'll figure that out. So, 3 of you?
I
Oh.
believe
A
Mr. Davis
possible, it's a
Oh.
possible.
and
Possible.
Oh,
Mr.
I'm-
Wilson, I
oh,
believe
yeah, I'm
both said that
available as
the
long as you got
29th is
breakfast.
okay.
29.
Yes.
Mr. President, do I have permission to spend money for breakfast or lunches, dinners from council's budget?
That's what
That's up to council.
That's, then leave it to council
I'm agreeing with
to make a
that.
motion.
I'll tell you what,
With
I'll buy
Dan
breakfast.
I'm in agreement
What
with that.
time?
I don't know a specific time yet. I would say 9 a.m., 10 a.m.
See, that's why I said breakfast.
It's gonna be a significant project. So
Oh, Lord. You're not convincing me significant.
it's not, yeah, it's not a fun project.
So is this an 8-hour shift?
Burger
or-
lighter.
That's why I said breakfast.
It's gonna take longer than a day, right? I mean,
Probably. Let's
I
get
would
as much
assume
as we
it's
can
going to
get
take-
done.
Yes,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
let's
yeah.
plan on getting some time into this on Saturday and get this started on the
okay.
29.
29th
What time?
of March,
What
Leave
time?
starting at 9.
9
Might
a.m.
be part-time.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Any other new business?
Mr. President,
Mr. Wilson?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Wilson.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood?
I'll second that.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Wilson, second by Ms. Underwood. Any discussion? Mr. Hedger, please call the roll.
Ms. Orm,
Yes.
Ms. Gaston,
Yes.
Ms. Chichester,
Yes.
Ms. Alexander,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Davis, Ms. Underwood.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.